Welcome to Talk Real Media's Taboo Podcast, where we talk about the shit that unites us. I am your host, M. Mays, and I'd like to thank you for supporting independent journalism. Grateful that you are joining us here as part of the May We Prevail mental health campaign, and for this edition of Matters of Mental Health. Today's guest is someone I refer to as a forever friend. Originally having crossed paths with them through advocacy and legislative-related efforts specific to healthcare reform, they have continued to be a major support to not only my work as an individual, but to the grand scheme, bigger picture vision for sake of the entire planet. He shows up daily in all the ways that he can for others as a source of light, with a pure heart and only ever the purest of intentions. This is someone who I respect greatly, as their life has not been free from struggle, yet he chooses to fight for the sake of himself, the world, and better days for all. I am appreciative of his experience, wisdom, generosity, as well as talent for retaining and teaching us all the facts of history, while also putting forth effort to rewrite it, to improve quality of life today and for generations to come. This person is someone who I have worked with closely, both on collective efforts and more personal ones. He has openly shared the impact that our work together has had on his life. It may be safe and fair to say it resulted in somewhat of a rebirth. But I take no credit for the energy healing this individual has done for the sake of himself. I congratulate and celebrate him while also inviting all of those who are listening to begin this sacred journey for themselves. For we are our own best investment, as the only guaranteed lifelong relationship is with ourselves. Tom Sion from Philly, welcome and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here.
Thank you, M. Mays, for taking the time to interview me this afternoon. Thank you so much. And for your kind words. It is my honor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's go ahead and begin. I'd like to ask, just to get things preheated, get our toes a little wet here, what does the concept or your own personal definition, perhaps, of mental health mean to you?
I'll give you the best answer I can give you. We have two types of health in our bodies. We have physical health and mental health. So in physical health, you have like blood pressure, cholesterol, the condition of your heart, your excretory system, your stomach, all the connected parts that make your body work, your joints and everything else. So that's the physical, which is important. But then the mental health. You have the brain, which is a gigantic supercomputer that nobody can really understand because it's all these electrical things flowing around up there. It controls everything you do. Like I'm waving my hand right now. I'm holding the phone in my left hand. My brain is saying, hold the phone in the left hand and don't drop it, so I don't drop it. My brain is saying, sit comfortably in the chair and deep breathe occasionally. So my brain is doing all these things. So that brain sometimes may need some attention. We may need to have a little bit of a tune-up, kind of like if your car was acting up, wouldn't you take it to the garage and say, hey, would you please lift the hood? I hear a really funny noise, and I think I'm going to get broken down. And they say you need a fan belt or a radiator hose or some brake fluid or whatever. So I say that they're equals. Physical health and mental health are complete equals, and they both should be tended to by a person early on. They should get their physical health tended to, get things checked, and their mental health, if they think that they have the slightest issue with their brain or the way it's working, there's professionals out there that you can talk to. They'll give you an exam, and they'll determine there may be an issue that they may be able to help you correct.
Absolutely. That's great. So is it safe to say that you believe these aspects, between physical and mental, are connected?
They are 100% connected because where's the brain at? It's on top of the head. Well, the head is the most important part of the body. You can see through your eyes. You can breathe through your nose. You take all your food in through your mouth. You hear with your ears. You get your hair done, you comb your hair, all those things. So the head is like kind of the control center for the entire body. I mean, think about it. You're breathing, you're talking, you're listening. You can do everything through the head. And on top of the head is that brain. It's enclosed by some skull, but the brain is up there. All these electrons and neurons are constantly floating around saying it's time to wake up. It's time to get to work. It's time to go to bed. It's time to have a meal, whatever. It's time to see the doctor because you've got palpitations, that kind of thing. So this brain is kind of a controller of that mental health and saying, hey, something's not right up here. I think we need some attention up here. Would you go get some attention? So definitely there's 100% connection because that brain is sitting up there. It's working 24/7 from the day you're born until the day that you die. It never stops. Even when you're sleeping, it's always doing something.
So true. I couldn't agree more. And, in my own journey, what I've learned to kind of embrace and accept is that, these not so great emotions or feelings, these things that come up that make us feel not so great or might get the juices flowing in our brains in a not so wonderful direction. Those are meant to be internalized and addressed as messengers. Things are coming up within us for a reason, and it's our responsibility to kind of sort that out and work through it.
Agree. I'd just like to bring up one of the emotions that you brought up, and this is kind of an important one, is crying. Sure. We all cry about things, and if we're emotional like me when somebody dies or somebody is hurt or you read something in the news about a little baby getting killed or whatever, I just start crying. The tears flow. And then I think, well, I feel bad for that person. I couldn't have helped them, but that's my way of showing emotion because my brain is saying, hey, Tom, this 3-year-old died in a house fire in Philadelphia this weekend, by the way. 3 kids died in a house fire yesterday morning, and it was very sad to hear it on the radio that they didn't have a smoke detector, and, they just didn't have any of that stuff, and it was at 2 a.m. And then you think about three kids and their father. The mother jumped, but she broke all her bones, and it just made me cry. And then there was a picture online on the newspaper today of the house, what's left of it. And you think, I know they could have been saved, but maybe they didn't know about smoke detectors. But they're the kind of things that make us cry. But that's what makes us a human being. You don't see dogs and cats and mice crying, but you see human beings having emotion. We have brains and emotion. We're able to love each other. We're able to do so many things as humans, and one of the things is that emotion of crying. And another emotion, unfortunately, can be getting depressed about something. And if you're getting depressed about something, you probably should raise a flag and say, is it long-term or is it going away? And if it's hanging around, you might want to get a referral to a professional who you can talk to. Thank you.
There's absolutely no shortage of heartbreak in the world. When we think about the injustices, we think about, the families that have been ripped apart with things like police brutality or, the fact that we're still having to have conversations about what women can and cannot do with their bodies or people having to fight for their, gender equality or maybe even non-binary equality, So I think it's valuable to have mentioned that. I think it really speaks to your character and your caliber of being that these types of things impact you because to an extent sometimes I look around and it just seems like we're a bit checked out. We're a bit kind of almost desensitized to all the things that are constantly going on. And that in and of itself, arguably could be considered mental illness in my personal opinion. So like we were saying, the emotions and feelings are messengers. Crying is so valuable. They have that quote that tears are the holiest of water because it is a release, right? When we push things down, when we set them to the side, when we try to disregard them, they don't really go anywhere, right, Tom? They just kind of build up. And that can come and kind of boil over at absolutely any point. And so it's not so much a matter of escaping or negating all of that, but actually facing and moving in it, right? How are we going to respond? How are we going to move through? So we talked about a bit of what mental health is. Give me an example of what a lack in mental health would look like. Maybe tell us a little bit about your journey throughout navigating your mental health and maybe a moment that it was lacking for you.
Okay, I'm going to try to be positive about this. I'm going to talk about dark times. Mia knows this, of course, but I've lived with a combination of migraine and cluster headaches for 55 years. The cluster started in 1970 when I had a major concussion. I was out for almost a day in a hospital, cut up. it hit my head, and I was really sick. And then I had clusters, and that kind of destroyed 1970. No school or anything, but that was kind of a low point in my life. So I had seen a lot of neurologists to find out, hey, what can we do about these headaches? What drugs are out there? Well, in the 1970s, there weren't too many drugs out there, but finally, a neurosurgeon said, why don't you get an MRI, brand new technology, 1989. We'll do an MRI, and we'll look at your brain, and we'll get to see, what flows through it, how it works, how it operates, all the lobes. And I said, yeah, we'll go in the big machine that bangs and spend an hour in the machine and the results. And the doctor said, I can't talk about it over the phone. I need you to come into the office. I went into his office, and he showed me the results and the pictures and everything. And he said, you got a 3-millimeter cyst up there on the choroid plexus, which controls your spinal fluid. And if that gets any larger, you're dead. Well, it's kind of jarring to hear that when you're like 40 years old and you have a full-time job and, you're trying to pay your bills. So I'll never forget this doctor. He said, I recommend you cancel your magazine subscriptions. So I was at a loss for words, but then I thought, this is a baseline test. We don't know. I could have been born with this thing, and I tried to think about it, and then I went home and I thought, what? This could be a death sentence, but either way I'm going to have the migraines and the clusters, whether I have a cyst up there or not. So it was this watchful waiting where he said, you'll get tested every 3 years, and you'll get an MRI, and we'll compare everything. And I said, that's great. And then this was May of 1989. I went home, and I thought, this isn't a good thing. I was in a bad place. I was in a down place. I had missed almost a month of work. My job was in jeopardy. My boss was working with me, but he said, if you don't come into work, and this was 1989 before we had work from home and telework and computers, if you don't come into work, we're going to have to release you, and you're going to lose your job, and you're not going to get any income, and we're going to have to say that you refuse to come to work. So it just drove me a little bit deeper, and I just felt this was it for me. So I came up with a way to do this and kind of a way to cause the end of life. And I called a mental health professional that I knew, and we talked for a few minutes, and he did an intervention, and someone took care of me that day and came there, and they took care of me and got me to a safer place in a hospital. And we had a long conversation, and we were able to kind of sort all this out to say, yeah, you got a brain tumor. Yeah, you got migraine. Yeah, you got cluster. But you're also alive. You're able to do things. You're able to see the sunrise in the morning. You're able to have friends. You're able to have a good job, a good paying job. So there's pluses and there's minuses. And the minuses probably aren't going to kill you. So this was the helpful mental health professional who kind of helped me see the sunrise instead of the sun setting on me. And that whole thing with that sunrise, when I look at it every morning, even now I get up to watch it. I think about the sun's rising on another day, and I'm thanking God I'm alive. So 43 years later, I'm thankful that I had a good team of professionals who got me rescued and kept me going and kept me alive and talked me out of, so to speak, of not living, and allowed me to lead a productive life where 43 years later I've accomplished so much. I'm proud of my advocacy work. I'm proud of the friends I have. I'm advocating for those who are living with migraine diseases. I'm also been working for 30 years as a volunteer for the MS Society, doing events planning and setup. So I'm doing something for the good of people instead of being not around. So I was fortunate that I was able to make the call and had the presence of mind to say, I need to talk to somebody before I do this. And I guess there's a case where you had like a dark time and you couldn't reconcile it yourself, but way before we had 911 and all these things that we have now, but we had doctors who actually answered their own phones back then. They weren't all owned by some huge company. You would call the doctor's office, he would pick up the phone and came over and he took care of things. And that's one of those things that you think about. There are ways to get help, and there are hotlines out there, and there are live people you can talk to on these hotlines if you feel that you're in danger of possibly ending life. So they're out there, and they need to be publicized with public service announcements on the cable channels and billboards. We need to publicize them because, as we say, for the employer I work for, they have a banner every time you log on that says, life is worth living. It's got the suicide hotline. For some reason, my employer publicizes that a lot. So you think about it, life is worth living. It may not be a picnic or a lot of fun. You may be kind of not well or whatever, but it is worth living. It's better than the alternative. I think when God wants us to go, he'll decide. Let's not us play God and decide if you believe in God. thank you for the question.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that answer. Thank you for being so courageous in sharing. With being a man in particular, I have to imagine that, there's just some extra stigma with that. There's extra judgment. So I know that it's not easy to share, and I just really want to commend you and validate what your experience has been like, Tom. It really sounds like you prevailed in that moment. You made a decision. You were going to make a decision one way or another, and you prevailed. You made it through a time that felt impossible to instead morphing it, right, language matters, to I'm possible. And so I'm very thankful for your sharing and the fact that you're still here, because I know that it is not easy. I know it wasn't easy then. I know it's not still easy now. But I do agree that life is worth living. It's kind of on us. It's an individual responsibility, if you will, to take that ownership of our existence and make something out of it and seek out, the more silver linings. Dark times, I would have to imagine, are part of nearly everyone's life. And I would also estimate that you still endure those on occasion, because it's part of the human experience, right? It's part of existing. So can I ask, what helps you get through it, Tom?
Well, one of the things is, believe it or not, 40-some years later, I have a relationship with that same mental health professional. We do a once-a-month telehealth visit, which my insurance company now pays for because of the telehealth laws have changed. And once a month we chat because my diagnosis way back when was I had depression. And I had severe depression caused by a lot of pain and missing work, and just things were all like building up in me, thinking I'm going to lose my job, my family. My mother had cancer at the time. She was still alive, and there was a lot going on in my life. And I thought, geez, I got these headaches, and they're telling me I got a tumor. But years later, I still maintain a relationship with a mental health professional just to chat about things. It could be world events, or it could be sometimes it's sports or the elections or, Easter or whatever, but we chat for about an hour once a month, and that kind of gives me some grounding, because sometimes you need to talk to someone who's not part of the family and who's not one of your friends, because sometimes you don't want to go over this with your friends because they have their own problems. But a professional, that's their job. Talking therapy is their job. They've spent all these years in medical school to learn to do talking therapy and to talk people out of doing bad things. So I don't need any medication. At the time I did way back when, but now I don't need any medication. I just need to talk to somebody every few weeks, and that's one of the things that helps me. And the other thing is the self-care that I learned from you, Maeve. The self-care of taking care of yourself, going like a temperature check of yourself, so to speak, seeing how you feel when you get up in the morning. Is there something alarming where I need to see a doctor, or is it okay? I can live with it. The self-care of like doing the deep breathing, morning, afternoon, night, and before you go to bed. You taught me that, by the way. But you do the deep breathing, and you suck the air in, and you blow it out, and you just feel refreshed, and you feel less stressed afterwards. And the mindfulness is another thing that's helpful for me. So these are all self-care that anybody can do. Now, in some cases, self-care and deep breathing is going to get you out of a depression. You may need to talk to somebody who can kind of talk to you and get it out of you and find out what's bothering you and what can we do to help you and maybe improve your outlook a bit. But I believe firmly in self-care, because when you've got chronic pain almost every day, sometimes you need to like rescue yourself. Although there's rescuers out there with lifeboats and, and all that stuff, sometimes you need to rescue yourself. And one of the banners that we have on our website at work, they have like a little anchor there and like a little, what do you call, life preserver. It says life is worth living, because the employer I work for happens to be a big promoter of keeping people healthy and wellness and that sort of thing. But, we need to help ourselves, and you think about it when you're on the airplane and you sit on the airplane and the flight attendant says, okay, we have oxygen up above, and if we lose cabin pressure, the oxygen will fall down. But first put the oxygen on a young child first and then put it on yourself. So they're saying take care of others who can't take care of themselves, and then take care of yourself. Don't leave yourself behind in case a tragedy happens in a plane. There's little things like that that make you think, you need to take care of others, but you also need to take care of yourself, because there's nothing selfish about self-care. I know it has the word self in it, But it's not selfish. It is self-care. It's taking care of one's body and taking care of one's mind. If you think your mind needs a little bit of tune-up or some attention, find somebody out there, get a referral from your personal doctor. There's plenty of mental health professionals. There's counselors. There's psychologists. There's psychiatrists. There's MSSs out there. There's LSW, licensed social workers. There's many, many people out there that will help you. And there are county and state agencies that will pay for a lot of this, depending on your income level. So don't worry about getting a huge bill or whatever, because you have each county and each state has agencies that provide for people's mental health. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. And, access to things like this can seem a bit out of reach for some of us, but one way or another, things need to exist outside of ourselves. It doesn't matter if you draw, paint, sing, yell, write, call someone, exercise somehow in whatever way that you're able. Take advantage of the limitless resources that we have readily available these days more than ever. Take advantage of the technology that is at our disposal. Use it for your greater good. I mean, YouTube, for example, countless free resources. And then again, it's really valuable to just take a moment and reflect on the human connection. I really look at us all on a human race level, and I know that although each of our experiences and our walks through life have been and continue to differ, and that's where diversity comes in, and that's beauty to be embraced. But on that human level, you take out the specifics that make us different. When we talk about the impact things like trauma or heartbreak, have, it's very similar. When you're going through the emotions, you're going through the grief, right? And if we could learn to open up and create spaces such as this right here that are safe and we value one another and we meet each other somewhere in the middle, I mean, that in and of itself is life-saving. And I really love what you said. I love it so much I'm going to repeat it. Nothing selfish about self-care. The more and more I have learned about it, the more and more I have implemented it in my own life, I have actually found that self-care is one of the least selfish things that I can do, because you pour into yourself, you enter that authentic place where you're operating from, and then you show up in the world in that way. Not only can you really be present for others, but you also are demonstrating that this is possible. I mean, there's no reason that we can do it and the next person can't, other than making the decision, right? And another thing that you said is to rescue ourselves. I love that, because no one is coming to save us, and it comes down to, yes, we can have a support system. Yes, we might find a mental health professional, and that's all great. But at the end of the day, when we talk about, my vision is being kind of curled up in that fetal position on the cold, hard floor, and it's just you, yourself, and your thought, you better save yourself. You better find a way to show up for yourself in that moment. And sometimes it does look like staying where you are and sitting in the darkness and processing. But to an extent, that can only get us so far and can only help us so much. So some of us do have caregivers or loved ones that help us survive on a daily basis, okay? But it's an important point to ponder that we must be our own caregiver and our own loved one to ourselves first and foremost. And not everyone would understand what I'm about to say, but I still want to convey it to you, Tom, because I think it's valuable. You kind of touched on it earlier, too. But in a very large way, I have had to live my life for the sake of others. Now, when I've shared that sort of mentality with a medical provider, they're always kind of taken aback, right? They have their little notepad. Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more, right? Because they don't look at that as being healthy. But what I mean about it is, if my life, and I wonder if you agree, if my life were to have just been about me and just about my pain or my agony, it's safe to say that I very literally wouldn't be here. And I mean on this call, I mean working on this campaign, I mean like alive, period. Okay? Things had to become about something greater than myself Can you relate to that?
I can relate to it, and I think about your history and, your relatively young age to me. I think about what you've been through, with some family things and some caring for others. Your whole life is about love. It's not about pain. It's not about your brain or, many, many years of daily migraine. Your life isn't about pain when I look at you and I talk to you. Your life is about love. You love people. You take care of people. You help people out. You've been helping people out for many, many years. And in this current situation that we have with brutality and racial justice, you've done wonderful, wonderful things in your hometown. Try to raise some awareness and try to get people treated equally instead of unequally. And there's, I've seen your examples. I've seen the pictures. So your life is about love of others and love of yourself, the self-love and the self-care and everything. But your life is about helping others and loving others. And I think you're right. That's kept you going because you have a goal when you get up in the morning. You say, okay, I'm going to do this volunteer job today. I'm going to get down to my city council today, and I'm going to talk about a bill that's pending that we need to get passed. Or I'm going to write an article for Pain News Network that I just printed out over here, by the way, about, stigma in healthcare where you're not treated equally because you have some health issues. And they say, well, where's your COVID card? Well, like you said in the article, we can't all have COVID cards because that's between you and your doctor. It's not between you and the government. So I totally agree that, your life is about love and loving people and taking care of people. And as long as you're on earth, you're going to be loving people. You're going to be fighting for the causes you've always fought for. And you're always going to be helping people and being a help to somebody and being kind of a light and a positive impact on other people to make them feel a little better about themselves and make them feel that their life is worth living. And that's a wonderful quality for a young woman to have, to just kind of preach love and just be love. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those kind words, Tom. And I see the same in your life. I feel that it may be true for those of us who have been kind of kicked down, knocked down, deeper and lower than we ever thought we would be able to claw our way out of. There is a grace that comes out of that. There is a special sort of empathy and compassion that permits us to even show up for others in the ways that we do. So it's very empowering at times, right? Like, I exist for the sake of other people. But then, depending on where I may be at mentally, right, because it's ups and downs, nobody has it all figured out. So there's times that it can kind of feel daunting and a little sad, like, I survive solely for the sake of other people, right? But you are so right. I love looking at it through that lens. It all boils down to being about love. And to me, there's really no better or more important reason to exist. So,
one last thing about love. We've known each other for 3 years, and all the communications we have with text and phone calls, you always bring up the word love and that you love me. And at first I thought, wait a minute, I'm like 40 years older than you. I'm not going to marry you or anything. But then I realized she means the kind of love that the true friends have that truly care about each other, and that's love. That's what real love is. When you care about somebody, you care about their welfare, and you ask how they're doing with a little text or a note that says, hey, you breathing today, or what's going on today? And it gave me a new meaning to the word love. It's not just, when people get married or they're engaged or the mother and father, you love your mother and father, when kids do that. It's not just love between cousins and nephews and everything like I see. It's the love of a person because you care about the person and you want to be close to the person. And even if we're about 1,000 miles away, you still feel close at heart to the person because I feel like you care about me. I care about you, and we exchange little notes all the time and emails and pictures and everything, and we just show that you can have love between another person and you can care about them, and it can give you like a little bit of an uplifting feeling to say, hey, somebody out there really cared about me. She sent me a note today and said how I was doing, and I said lousy. She didn't yell at me, or maybe I said great. So there's the new definition of love that I have that after all these years I just never really thought about, the love between friends. And when you say forever friend, it must be a lot of love because I got a few years left in me yet. So thank you.
Good. I hope it's a few plus a few. And, when I go back to that example of kind of being curled up in the ball on the floor, not knowing, what to do or how to get up, in those moments it has really boiled down to, we talked about self-care, but self-love. I'm going to love myself. I'm going to be tender to myself. I'm going to be gentle to my being perhaps maybe even especially in these dark times. And something I've learned in my own journey is the more grace and humility that I'm able to offer myself, especially in those moments where it's difficult, the more I'm able to show up and do that for others. So, love to me, we have this whole romantic idea of love, of course, like you mentioned. It's kind of this fairy tale, Disney.
Yeah.
I don't know really how it's going because the divorce rate is really high. But anyway,
Right.
Love in general is what the world needs. Love in general, in my mind, is something that could actually save our planet. And it begins in ourselves. If I don't value my existence, if I don't look at myself with the lens that I have anything to offer or any sort of worth, then obviously I'm not going to be able to carry that out and view others with that perception either, okay? So I start valuing my own life in whatever small ways, perhaps at first, that I can. I move in such a way to add more value to my life because that's a personal account of, your ownership of your own self. And so through that, we can recognize humanity. We can meet each other. This is what we're seeing playing out on a global scale, right? Lives matter, okay? So your existence is valuable to me. Your experience, your feelings, your emotions matter to me. I don't have to agree. I don't have to necessarily understand. I don't even have to relate or agree. I don't have to, have had to walk the same walk as you to acknowledge the fact that you matter and the fact that you exist is important, and we can meet each other in that. And so I love the concept of the unconditional love. To me, that looks like breaking the stigma, changing the conversation surrounding mental health or the lack thereof. It's exactly what the world needs, and like I said, I really feel that it could save us. And that's why we bring up and discuss these topics, is to save lives. So you had shared with me recently a couple of resources, Tom, that people can use and reach out to in their times of need. Would you mind sharing that with our listeners?
Okay, I'm going to give you the first resource, and this one's been around for a few years. It's called the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. It's a toll-free number. It's all over the United States. It works. It's 800-273-8255. Actually, it's talk at the end, TALK, but you have a cell phone, it's easier, 800-273-8255. And if you call that number, you will get a live person immediately, and you'll tell the person you're having an issue, you're thinking about maybe not continuing on with life, and they will get you resources, and they will get somebody on the line to help you immediately. They will help you. They may not save you, but they're going to do everything within their power to save you, and you're probably going to get a call back from somebody. So that's the National Suicide Prevention Hotline that has been existing for a few years now, 800-273-8255. Now, through the efforts of, actually it was the Trump administration and the Biden administration, they coughed up over $200 million because there was a big push. Why don't we have a 3-digit suicide hotline? Like we have 911, and I think it's 811 if you're going to dig your property, and 311 if the city street light burns out. Well, they finally come up with a number. Unfortunately, they were out of 11s. So on July 16th of this year, they're launching a brand new national 3-digit suicide hotline with live operators in all 50 states, funded by a government grant, and will be financed by a small 40-cent charge on your monthly cell or landline phone bill. That'll pay to keep this thing going because you'll have call centers in each state. So the system's smart enough to know what area code you're calling from, and it'll route your call to where you're located, not so much the area code, because our cell phones have all kinds of area codes. So let's say I'm in Philadelphia. No matter what number I'm calling from, it'll route the call to somewhere in Pennsylvania, and I'll get some help. So 988 is the new national 3-digit suicide hotline that will be launched officially on July the 16th of this year. And again, it's funded by the government. It's going to be financed by a small charge on your phone bill. It supplements the 800 number, the 800-273-8255. Because a lot of us have cell phones. Everybody's got some kind of a phone in their pocket, so maybe they have their phone in that pocket and they're not feeling good about things. They can just pick that phone up and they can call and get a live operator. It's not a recording. You're going to get a live operator. And they're also going to come up with chat and text capability on that new number pretty soon after they launch it. So these are resources for people to at least talk to somebody, to at least talk it out, to talk to somebody who's a professional who can kind of help you through it and talk you through it instead of just being alone there and not talking to anybody and then possibly getting a little bit deeper into it and not being able to save yourself, like you said, Mia. Rescue, the life preserver. This is another opportunity for some rescue, for a life preserver. These are toll-free phone numbers that you can call from anywhere in the United States and talk to a professional about what's going on with you. And you may get some questions, but they may be able to talk you through something that you didn't think about before. And this is part of your self-care. This is a resource that we as Americans need to definitely take advantage of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for sharing that vital information. I'll be sure to attach those numbers with this segment when we post it as well. So, I've been in situations where someone is conveying their difficult time, right? And there may be someone around who isn't quite sure. As humans, we sometimes don't exactly know how to just sit with someone in their discomfort. We don't do well with discomfort. We really try to avoid it by any and all means necessary. So I've witnessed times where someone is really just kind of pouring their heart out. And for all we know, it could be the very first time that they've done it. We could be the only people around them that we have. And so I've witnessed times where instead of just kind of sitting and listening and holding that information and just being present, sometimes people kind of jump ahead. And although it is a tremendously valuable resource, and I don't want to take away from that at all, I could also see how when you're bearing your soul to someone and all they can kind of do is hand you a hotline number, it can feel a little belittling or as if they're just kind of trying to wash their hands clean of, the problems. So it has left me under the impression that sometimes that could be enough. If I'm at my wit's end and I'm reaching out to someone and all they can kind of do is like, I don't know, man, but here, call this number. I've seen it that it could almost be that final push for someone who might already feel disregarded or alone. So I just think it's an important little caveat to mention and to realize that these are tools. These are meant to be modalities that are put together with other plans of action that can help you get from one point and state of mind to another. But again, there's no one quick fix. There's no cure. There's no right answer. We're all just kind of trying to navigate. We're all just sort of trying to keep our heads above water. And I think something that we could strive toward as a collective body, a collective society, is setting our own discomfort in the midst of somebody else's discomfort. So if you're sharing with me that you're having a hard time and that really makes me feel anxious and I don't know what to do, or, we need to realize that it's not always about us fixing anything. Sometimes, like you mentioned, all we need, and this is a very basic human need, is to be heard. And that's one of the reasons that we're hearing, a global outcry when it comes to things like the inequities between the races and whatnot, is there are certain classifications of people who are not and have not been heard. And so, again, these resources exist for that purpose, but again, only any resource or only any person or whatever it may be can only take us so far, and we're always going to be left with that personal decision as to what we're going to do with our darkness and how we're going to use it. Because we know, like we've been talking about, darkness is a part of life, much like light. You see the sunrise, you see the sunset. You see the sun, you see the moon. So these less than ideal feelings creeping back in are inevitable. It means that we're still alive. So, Tom, I'm curious, what are some things that you do now that help you stay out of what I would call the depths?
Well, I'm going to answer that one, but I'm going to quickly talk about these hotlines. And I would agree, sometimes if you say, why don't you just call this number and they'll save your life? Well, it doesn't work that way. And I guess if I was faced with a situation where somebody confided in me and said, you know what, I don't think I want to live anymore, I think I would probably immediately call my own personal doctor because I can get to her immediately. I know her, I have a cell phone. And I would have my own personal doctor talk to that person right away. We do a three-way call or something. I don't care what it costs, right? We do a three-way call, and I'd have a medical doctor talk to the person and get a little bit of background information. And hopefully my personal physician will be able to get that person to a professional because, we have limits. I mean, we're human beings. We're not doctors. We're not professionals. We know a lot because we have pain. We help others with pain. But, we also recognize we have certain limits, and if we give a person, say, the wrong advice and it doesn't work, we're going to have some guilt. So I would probably, I've had a couple people tell me, I don't feel too good about life anymore. And I've said, you need some help right away. So I'm going to take you there and get you the help you need. I'm going to take you somewhere where you're going to get some help, whether it be urgent care or an ER or something. Excuse me. So the second, if you could repeat the question, I'll answer it for you.
Of course, yes. Thank you, Tom. And, I like this conversation because I personally, and I know I'm not alone in this, but I'm only going to speak on my own personal experience. That's all I have to really live from, right? I have mixed feelings about reaching out for help, okay? Not necessarily hitting up an anonymous hotline or something, but the difficulties that I've experienced at times, and I'm so grateful to hear you say, that you have a doctor that you can not only reach out to, but will actually answer the phone. We have all these kind of gatekeepers and things in place these days that can keep us, from direct contact with an actual provider. But the difficulties I've experienced is a large part as to why I do this work now. Sometimes those in positions I'm going to put help in quotations just for this next example. Sometimes those who are in positions to help us actually can make things a little bit more difficult at times. Like, for example, we have all these protocols in place that, are meant to be patient-centered. I don't really know how I feel about that at this point with, healthcare being more so of a business oftentimes than anything else, unfortunately. Just one of the many systems we're working on dismantling and rebuilding. But, if I come to you and I say, look, I'm having a really hard time and I've lived with this pain forever and the darkness is kind of closing in on me. I really feel like I'm not sure what's next or what to do. What's not helpful, Tom, and again, this is my humble personal opinion, but what's not helpful is now I'm flagged in my chart, okay? Now I am perhaps looking at limited job options or what have you because of what's in my file, right? So sometimes because of the way things are currently set up, sometimes it can cause more harm, which is the exact opposite of what someone needs when they are at their wit's end. And so that's another reason why this campaign exists. That's a reason why these conversations are so important, because we need to take the stigma and the judgment out of it. I have a loved one that attempted when I was pretty young. They're actually another guest on this podcast series. And their attempt was not successful. Or it was, in my opinion, right, because they're still here. But, it didn't end up working out. They're still alive, and I'm grateful for that. But afterwards, family shunned them. Certain doctors won't see them. There's certain notes in their medical chart that, like I said, can interfere with a person who is trying to move on and who is trying to get better. And so that's why I think that sometimes we really have these protocols in place that we think are helpful, but they can actually cause hindrance and keep someone really from getting the sort of help they need. So I just wish that the world were full of Toms and we could all just reach out and have someone that would reach out on our behalf and be there for us. And that's kind of what we're trying to cultivate here, right? But, it's just I wish it were as simple as picking up the phone and calling, or finding a provider who would actually really hear what you're saying. And again, not try to just kind of set your discomfort to the side and follow a protocol. Like, protocols are in place and that's great, but they're not one size fits all for everybody. You know what I mean?
I know. Yeah, I know.
So, yes. So, that comes down to kind of the self-advocacy, the self-awareness, the knowing what you need. But it almost seems like these days you use certain words and you're flagged. You use certain words, you convey a certain type of experience, and you're judged. You're looked down on. You're thought less about. And that's the exact kind of opposite reaction that I feel we should be having.
Yes, we shouldn't be labeling people with words like crazy or nuts, or, I still hear these expressions every once in a while, the guy's nuts or he's crazy. We should never use that to describe a human being, never. Maybe they have a mental illness that they're trying to correct. Okay, that doesn't mean they're nuts or they're crazy or they belong in an asylum somewhere. It's just unfortunate. We still have this stigma in society where we look down on people who have mental issues and it's not their fault. Something went wrong in their brain. Maybe they're trying to get it fixed, or they're taking medication, or whatever. But for some reason, we still think, they're crazy. Go avoid them. They're nuts. They're not. I've known people that have gotten mental health therapy and have gotten a lot better over the years, and I still am friends with some people that needed medical help. I have a family member who spent 2 weeks in a mental hospital in New Jersey. He was hanging from a jail cell in 1979. I came down to a town in New Jersey and talked to the police, and we saved his life, and we got him into a state facility for 2 weeks. They got him a good doctor, and now he's alive. He's a father of 2 kids. He's got 2 grandkids. So this is a family member who, it took an intervention. It took a quick ride 70 miles down to a police station to talk to the right people, but it took an intervention with me as a family member to get things straightened out, because he was at his end of his rope, and then once he got to talk to the people at the state hospital, he realized that, hey, I got a wife, I've got kids, I've got all this stuff here, am I going to give it all up? I'll never get to see my grandbaby. So there's an example where, you get a call and it says, hey, somebody's in trouble. It's like 1979, we don't have all this technology. You jump in a car and you go somewhere and you help the person, and then they get straightened out, fortunately. But there's an example where I kind of feel that I might have saved somebody's life. I don't know whether I did or not, but I might have been instrumental in saving, and that's something that keeps me going, that I was instrumental in saving a person's life because I pointed them in the right direction. I didn't medicate them or help them or talk to them about it, but I pointed them in the direction where they got support and they got the right medication and they were put back on the right track again. And they're, I think of that family member who's my age. I would never, that person is nuts or crazy or anything, because he leads a normal life. He's retired, getting a pension. He babysits his grandbabies twice a week. So there's an example where you need to help others within your means, though, within your limits. You can't provide medical advice because we can't do that. It's not a good idea to do that because you might give the wrong advice. So like you said, we need to listen, be a really good listener. Talk a little bit, but be a really good listener if somebody comes to you with a problem, and see, how deep is the problem and how dangerous is this problem, and maybe this person is thinking about ending their life, and we need to get an intervention, find somebody to help that person, like right away. Maybe they need a visit with somebody, or maybe they need to be driven to a facility so they can talk to somebody. You need to hang out in the waiting room for an hour while they're getting the help that they need. They're the kind of things, that's why we're here for kindness. We're here for love. We're for kindness, and we're here for a little bit of joy also. But we're here to help our fellow man and woman. That's why we're on earth. We're here to help others. We're not here to be selfish and have the biggest car and the biggest television and the biggest house and a boat and all this stuff that I don't have. We're here to help others and give from the heart. And that, when you give from the heart and you help somebody else out, that is bigger than any huge TV or brand new car. That's bigger than any of that stuff. The biggest, coffee maker. That's bigger than any of that stuff. That gives you a feeling inside that you can't replicate with a material thing.
Yes, I couldn't agree more, Tom. Thank you so much. We can only meet someone else to the extent that we have met ourselves. And so that's part of what makes our own inner work so important. We all, each and every one of us, to some extent, have a quote-unquote mental issue, okay? Because we have all endured things that have changed us, They have altered our perception. They have helped morph us, at times for better or worse. We try to stay away from the labels, but into something and someone other than who we used to be, right? That doesn't make us crazy, and that does not diminish our worth as a person. And I kind of like wording it that way. I think maybe people would understand what I mean by living for others better if I worded it the way you did, which is, assisting in saving others' lives. Again, not handing out medical advice that we have no merit in giving, out of our scope or what have you. But first and foremost, choosing to save our own self, and then meeting each other in the middle of, just being human. Beginning with saving our own lives, we can save other people's lives, and meet each other on that level. So that's really valuable, Tom. Thank you. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about that?
I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that because, we're here to help others to the extent that we're able to. We're here to, if people need a rescue, we're here to give them some advice that might help them get rescued, even if it's beyond our means. We're not here to just say, well, that's too bad, you don't feel good, why don't you just go away? Because unfortunately in today's society, as you know, if you ever watch the news or whatever, the way they treat people, they just say, why don't you just go away? Like with the racial injustice and with the police and everything, everybody says, well, why don't they just go away? Well, how can you tell a human being to go away? We're all human beings. We're just different skin tones. I always tell you this. But we're all human beings. There's 7 billion of us here. Why would we go away? We all belong here, too. We have every right to be on this earth as anybody else. So why can't we just get together and cut this out? And that's what the most frustrating thing about me when I hear these news reports is, why can't we put a stop to this? There's no reason for this. It's got to stop because we're going to destroy ourselves. And, we need more love. And if you're an old person like me, in 1965, there was a song by Jackie DeShannon that was called What the World Needs Now is Love, Sweet Love. If you ever watch that YouTube video, you'll be in tears because she's this young singer from England. And it's all about we don't need another mountain, we don't need another, we don't need another, we don't need all this stuff. We need sweet love. We need people to love each other. When I was 16 years old, that song came out. I thought about that, being a teenager. I thought, yeah, the world needs more love. Why do we have all these wars? Why are we killing everybody? Why are we slaughtering people on our own streets here? Why do we have all these guns where we're shooting people through their cars? Why? Why do we have all this hate? We need more love. So I play that song occasionally. I think about, somebody almost 60 years ago made a song about that, and we're not there yet. We need to get there.
We do need to get there, and that's why things like this exist. It comes back to self, and that's, again, why it isn't selfish, right? If I value my experience and I value my life, I can therefore value your experience and your life. And the question always kind of comes back to me. It's kind of rhetorical, because we're both on the same wavelength here. But why should someone else's suffering be disregarded? Yet we would want the utmost respect and understanding if it were us. So if we were to just kind of apply that simple logic, the world could change. And I'm kind of done being down and out of all the changes that the world as a whole needs to make, and I'm zeroing in on that inwardly and just kind of trying to show up being those types of changes for myself first and foremost, and demonstrating that in my own life because I'm aware that's really all I ultimately have control over, right? So,
please keep doing that. Please keep doing that. Just keep it up.
You're
a young person now. You got a lot of years. Just keep it up. I'm going to be watching your travels here on Twitter or whatever. Keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. You do the same, okay? So going back to that question I asked earlier, we know that while still being alive, we're going to endure less than ideal feelings, right? We're still going to be balancing that darkness. Just because maybe we made it to the other side of a difficult time does not mean that we won't be faced with difficult times in the future, right? So I'm curious, what are some things that you do now that help you stay out of those depths?
I'm going to say lifestyle modifications, changing an attitude, changing the way that you feel about something so you can live with something that you didn't think you could live with. I'm not just talking about pain. I'm talking about people that get on your nerves or people that annoy you. You know, they're out there. You can't get rid of them because maybe they're part of your family. So it's a lifestyle modification where you might have to turn the other cheek, where you might have to say, okay, I don't agree with you, but we're not going to argue about it because we're not going to agree on it. Let's not waste our breath disagreeing. Like there's people that feel that I make up the pain. It's a big joke and everything. I just want to lay down and not be anywhere. Well, okay, fine. You can feel that way. I'm not going to argue with those people because it isn't worth it. So I would say lifestyle modifications where you change your lifestyle a little bit to accept certain things that you can't change. There are some things you can change, but there's a lot of things out there that we can't change. So maybe watching less of the news because of all the wars that are going on, a little bit less television because you can't sleep when you're thinking about those images. So you turn it off a little bit earlier. You turn your screens off at like 9:30, and you just don't deal with the keyboard or anything, and that gives you a little bit more calmness. But, yeah, there's things in my life that bother me and that get under my skin, but I try to turn the other cheek and say, you know what, I'm more important than that person that has a bad opinion of things. I'm more important. I got to take care of me. Let's take care of me and then let that person take care of themselves. If they choose not to take care of themselves and make themselves miserable, that's their business. We only have one life. And we're going to be stressed all the time because we hate everybody or we're angry at everybody or we're always picking a fight. We're not going to have a long life and we're going to have a miserable life. So I say, live and let love, take care of yourself. You know, I always say keep your friends close and your enemies distant, and I'm going to quote a mental health professional who gave me advice more than 40 years ago. Tom, stay away from people that bring you down. And that is the best advice I have ever had, and I keep thinking that every time something comes up, I'll think, just keep your distance, move 6 feet away from them, don't argue with them. It'll just raise your blood pressure. So that is very good advice.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Keep your distance from those who bring you down. And I would say, I would jump off that a little bit and say, including yourself. You know,
yes.
If there's times that you're almost like your own worst enemy, right? Because we know we're our own worst critic, and we know that the thoughts can kind of of course, twist and turn in there, you know, and quickly turn dark at times. So if you're needing to distance from some thoughts or feelings that you're having, you know, we can acknowledge that they exist without allowing them to necessarily swallow us whole, right? I love that idea of the lifestyle modifications because there are certain things that we cannot change. So we must instead alter our approach and the way that we respond.
Yes.
Yes.
If it's raining today, you know, it's raining, okay. If I have to run an errand and it's raining, I get a big umbrella out of the basement. I have this huge red golf umbrella. I carry the umbrella. I wear a coat. I don't get wet. I wear the appropriate shoes. I go to the post office or the bank. I come home. I put the umbrella away. Can't stop the rain. Yeah, you use the wipers. And we have to turn the lights on here when you have the wipers. But you go out and do it anyway. If you don't feel like it, we'll do it tomorrow. If we don't want to go out in the rain, I'll do it tomorrow. It'll still get done. It's going to be done a day later.
That's right. And I can think of a personal example, actually, between you and I that I'll share real quickly. Tom had come to visit the headquarters of, you know, this work and where we are and what we do. And so he came to visit, and I had instructed that maybe if he got up early enough, he could take himself on a nice leisurely walk across from where he was staying to enjoy the sunrise at the lake. I'm thankful to live somewhere that we have great bodies of water. We have the Great Lakes around us. So he did this and reported back to me later that there was really no sunrise because the sun was not out. Now, it was kind of overcast. It ended up being a kind of chilly, rainy day. But I lovingly reminded Tom that whether or not we necessarily can feel or see with our eye that the sun is there, it's still light, right? It's still daytime, so we know that it's still in existence. And so I would invite people to take that kind of principle or bottom layer idea and apply it in your own life, even if there is a lot of, you know, metaphorical rain happening around you or inside you right now. We are nature. Nature goes through seasons, and we can kind of roll with the punches, if you will, to get ourselves to brighter days. Right, Tom?
Right, and that, by the way, even though the sun wasn't out and I got a little wet, that was beautiful. I set my alarm for 6. I got showered and dressed. I walked out there along Lake Mendota, wherever it was, and they had the little boat launching ramp. There was a guy picking up the trash with a truck, you know, and everything, and he said, "What are you doing out here in the rain?" I said, "I'm just here enjoying Madison. I'm only here for the day." And I walked over there. I took some pictures. I went over to Lakeside Cafe. Tracy fixed me a nice lunch or breakfast or whatever it was. It comes with the hotel, and came back to the room. It was raining, but I still enjoyed being there in the range of seeing something different on a Monday morning, 1,000 miles away from home, seeing a different kind of beauty. Even though it was raining, it was still beautiful to me, and I'm glad that I did it. I'm glad I took your advice, set my alarm, and did it. So little things like that, even if you're getting soaked, you can have the memories 3 years later and think, wasn't it nice that I got to do that, because I may never get to do that for the rest of my life. So I'm glad that it's in my memory book. And sometimes when I'm down, I'll think about, hey, remember the day we went to the University of Wisconsin? We went to the little lunchroom there, and we saw the spot where they have a memorial to Otis Redding. I think about all that stuff, and I think, wasn't that nice? And, you think about, doing nice things with a nice person, and it kind of can lift you up a little bit when you're not feeling great. And sometimes you just think about that, or you look at the picture, and they're the little things in life that keep me going and keep me wanting to be alive and enjoy life, because of the memories and the people that have crossed my life and the friends that I've made and the advocacy that I've done and the people that kind of rely on me for advice sometimes. So that's all the things where I think that God wants me here for a while longer, to kind of be a light to people and be a help to people and be a good person.
Absolutely. But, every day may not be great, but there is something good to be found, even if we have to look a little harder at times, right? So, Tom, I'm curious, is there a specific affirmation or a specific quote or anything that is kind of your go-to when maybe you can feel the darkness creeping in a little bit, just something, a little elevator pitch of some sort that we could leave our listeners with today that might be helpful for them?
Yes, I know I'm bringing faith into this, and I certainly respect everybody's religious beliefs, but we have a saying in my Christian faith, God helps those that help themselves.
Yeah.
And I think of that often. I'm not saying I'm not telling people who to believe in or what to believe in. I'm just saying in my particular faith experience, I've always felt that God has wanted us to go help yourself. Don't just reach out, hey, God, I'm sick, hey, this, that. If you're sick, go to a doctor. Help yourself. You've got all these resources out there. So I really feel that God helps those that help themselves.
Right. We have to, it goes back to the whole concept of saving yourself, rescuing yourself, and your experience is valid. We're not rooted in any kind of specific faith or anything here, but we can say universally, have faith in something. Find something to put your faith in. Maybe start with yourself. Do you have any other closing thoughts for our listeners today, Tom?
Well, right now I'm kind of in this mellow feeling where I have some tears in my eyes because of what we talked about. They're happy tears, and the only thought I have is that I can't thank you enough for setting up this interview. I know we're doing May We Prevail. This is, I believe, the third year in a row. We're kind of get a head started on it this year because we're starting up in May and June. We need to get a head start on this with the podcasts and everything, and I feel that this is a very valuable program and exercise and I think right before we started recording, I said, hey, if we can just help one person who hears this podcast who says, you know what, maybe I need to call my doctor, then we made it across the finish line. So we don't know who we're helping, but hopefully maybe someone will hear it and they'll say, hey, I heard this podcast today and this guy talked about his life and he said, he contacted a doctor and the doctor rescued him and the guy's still around. And he's old, but he's around. So the only thing I can say is thank you very much for setting this up and making arrangements to do the interview by phone this afternoon. And thank you for being forever friend. Just thank you for all the work that you do. I see so much work that you're doing in so many varied areas. It's not just chronic pain or health or racial justice. There's so many things that you're doing. I see it at dance. You do so much, and I appreciate what you do for the universe.
Thank you, Tom. I feel the exact same way about you, and it really truly is a priceless gift to be seen. So I'm very grateful for your presence. Thank you for agreeing to not only, be here, but for fighting for the sake of your own life on the planet itself. You make it a better place to be. Thank you again so much for taking the time to save lives today, your own included.
My last word will be, you are a good woman. Thank you.
Thank you.